So I'll be presenting an overview of what might be next for oceans and human health from a marine science, marine policy aspect, particularly looking at Europe, but very much applicable worldwide as well. One of these buttons, that one. So first of all, I'll introduce who the European Marine Board are, for those of you who don't know. Then we'll look very much at what are the links between oceans and human health. We've already heard one aspect, but there are several others as well to cover. What are the risks of these interactions between humans and the ocean, but also the benefits. We need to consider both sides there. And then I'll set you a little bit in the policy context, at least for Europe, and sort of where we stand at the moment and perhaps where we need to be looking for the future. And then I'll give you a bit of a timeline. It's very much based on EMB activities in this area, but certainly gives you an idea of what has been taking place in this area so far and where perhaps we might be going in the near future. So, who is the European Marine Board? This is a picture from our last plenary meeting in Tenerife. We don't like to brag, but Tenerife. So we are a major national marine research organisation. We take members from research facilities, from funding organisations, and also more recently from consortia of universities who can represent that they are sort of a major player in marine science in their own country. And we operate as a platform to try and facilitate cooperation, coordination of marine science, not just in Europe, but also to some extent internationally. We are funded by our 33 members that we currently have, and also by external contracts, so mostly EU-funded framework projects. But also we are very lucky to have the support of VLIZ, and they look after us here in this building, in this great office space, and we're very grateful to them for that. So you will most likely recognise a lot of names on this list of members, and we're always looking to grow, trying to cover as many different parts of Europe as possible and be as representative of the marine science community in Europe as possible. And so moving more on to oceans and human health, what are the links? Well, first of all, I think we all understand that whatever links there are, they are very, very complicated. This is not an easy system to solve. What goes on between this huge expanse of water, all these different species, different kinds of ecosystems, and then humans living in different conditions, having very much different interactions with the oceans and the seas. Some people, they live in the coast, their very lives depend on fishing or being sustained by this environment. Other people maybe live in land, may have never seen the sea. It's a very distant, very unknown area to them. But they may still be benefiting in ways they don't know. And this is something very important to understand if we can move forward in understanding how we can keep both sustained in a healthy and positive way. So as I said, there are positive and negative interactions between oceans and human health, and I'll list some of those in a while. But looking at the topic itself, oceans and human health, this term was coined, that's the word I'm looking for, was coined in the USA as a meta-discipline. So obviously for a long, long time there's been a lot of research going on in oceans and ocean health, marine science, and also of course in medicine and public health. But the interdiscipline between these two, the collaboration has been almost lacking. You will know yourself, it's always very difficult to get collaborations going. But one of the ways you do this is perhaps you meet someone at a conference, through networks, through projects. But the chances of someone from a marine science background and someone from a public health background meeting are actually very unlikely in a sort of professional environment. And so there hasn't been this coordination and collaboration to as much an extent as perhaps in some other areas. But in the USA, they sort of realized that this was an area that they needed to tackle, that this was a collaboration that we really needed to set up. And so they in fact established dedicated centres that would focus just on this meta-discipline of oceans and human health. And I think there's about 7 centres now running in the USA. That's not something we have in Europe, so the term itself has been taken over here. There's been a lot of research going on now, and I'll show you some of the timeline. But to date, we still don't have dedicated oceans and human health research centres set up in Europe, and perhaps that's something that we could be looking to in the future. There is now growing recognition of the need for investigating these topics. There's been quite a lot of reports in the mass media recently about the whales with a stomach full of plastic. There's been a report this morning about microfibers found in drinking water. There is now this growing concern, at least of some aspects of this problem in the mass media, and that can only be helpful, I think. The more people that are aware, there will be pressure to do more research, to do more. But that's not enough. We also need policies to support this ongoing movement, to support environmental and health protection. And again, that's something I'll come back to in a minute. So there are still critical gaps, and we do need to look at interdisciplinary collaboration and naturally investment to support those. So what are the risks and what are the benefits? Well, we'll start at the top and then we'll go around the bad news and into the good news. So seafood, as we already know, there is a risk of contamination. There's various illnesses that can be contracted, and also a chance of microplastics now from eating seafood. However, seafood is also very good for us. There are many health benefits from eating this. So how do we balance those two sides? We don't want to lose the benefits, but also we need to control and mitigate the downsides. Moving around to pollution, this can take many forms: visible litter, chemicals, all sorts of different aspects. And then moving around to biological hazards, so again, algae blooms, parasites, bacteria, and also invasive species to an extent. Again, getting a bit more interest now, and people are really starting to look into how is this more interlinked. So not just looking at the specific details of an invasive species, but what are the wider implications for the ecosystem, for the people who rely on that ecosystem, for people's health, and so on. Climate change, very, very big one. We already know the huge impacts that this will have. But I read a study yesterday that was talking about, yes, we'll have global warming, so then that will mean there'll be ocean acidification, there'll be a reduced amount of oxygen, but this could have implications on the size that fish can grow to, because there will be less oxygen available, and so they just won't be able to grow as big as they would naturally. So this is another more complex implication that we need to take into account, and will lead back to that link. So it's not just a marine science question anymore. It then leads back to humans and human society. But there's also good news. So there's been ongoing research, specifically at the University of Exeter, on what's called the blue gym effect. So looking at the very positive mental and physical properties and benefits that you can gain from interaction with marine and coastal areas. It might be taking a walk along the beach. It might be looking at a particular landscape which is very beautiful, engaging with wildlife, spotting different species. And actually those almost easily accessible and very cheap in a way methods could also have a great benefit to public health. And there's been quite a lot of work there about how we could further promote this, how we could further utilize this. Perhaps that's something later down the road we could actually use in dedicated and professional medical treatments. Perhaps once upon a time they did used to go to the seaside to get the sea air and gain the benefits, and perhaps this is something we should more seriously be looking at again. Then we move around to marine biodiscovery and the wealth of resources that the ocean could provide if used sustainably in medicine, in nutraceuticals, in pharmaceuticals, whole range of products. And in fact, we're very close to launching a paper on marine biotechnology, what the case studies of success stories have been in Europe, and where this should be going in the future. Again, a very exciting area, and quite a good one for selling policy, because this is a low-hanging fruit. You can make money out of this, and so it's a very good hook to get people engaged. But also we can then begin the discussion of sustainability, looking after the ecosystems that provide these resources, and understanding the implications of using these different resources on humans. And then finally we go around to ecosystem services. So what do these ecosystems do for us? They provide areas for recreation. We also look at, after waste remediation, many other large, broad services that the oceans and ecosystems there provide to us, many which are not necessarily appreciated by the general public. And this is something I'll come back to later, that the more we can understand about what the ocean is providing for us, the more we're going to care about it, and the more we're going to want to do to preserve it. So just to set you in a policy context, here's a list. It's not complete by any means, but a list of just some of the related policies that are in place in Europe at the moment. Now, as you can see, it can be quite easy to divide these. A good portion are related to humans, to looking after people, and the other half are very much related to the marine environment, to protecting that, and to preserving it, to furthering knowledge on it. Now, the problem is that I struggle to find any which sit in that middle ground of oceans and human health. There's not really dedicated policies at the moment at European level which specifically take both of these aspects into account on an equal footing and move forward so that by addressing one area you're not accidentally upsetting another area. The ideal scenario would be not to scrap all these, not to start all over again, but perhaps to reword them, to look again at how we can more specifically include health into marine areas, how we can more specifically include marine into health areas. But this is just to give you an idea of the situation we currently have. And it can be very difficult to make these positive changes in going forward with sustainable oceans and sustainable human health if you do not have policies supporting that specifically. So I'll start off now with a little bit of a story about certainly European Marine Board's activities, but we like to think also Europe's activities in research in this area. And it started off back in 2011 with the FC project Claimer, which was quite a wide-ranging project looking at climate change impacts. But specifically, there was a questionnaire that was conducted of 10,000 citizens in 10 EU countries, and it asked them of 15 key marine environmental issues: how well informed are you, and how concerned are you? Now, as you can see, there's a whole list of different topics. Pollution at the coast is a particularly important one right at the top. Also invasive species, jellyfish blooms, that kind of thing. And as you can see, the actual level of informedness is consistently on under 50%, whereas the level of concern is often over 50%, going up to 80%. So people are very concerned about these topics, but they do not feel that they are well informed. They don't know much about them. They don't know what to do about it. What can their actions be to help? And I think this is very important. This is something that is now being addressed through what's called the Ocean Literacy Movement, which was mentioned a minute ago. And I'll mention a project later in my presentation that's looking to address this. How do we, the scientists who know what these impacts will be having, how do we portray that to the general public who might not be aware? They are concerned, that isn't the problem. They just don't know what to do, what the impacts are, and how they can help. Also in 2011, we produced a document on monitoring chemical pollution. So that was specific at looking at all the different kinds, not just plastics, but all sorts of different components, which can be found in the oceans. How can we more effectively monitor this? What are the implications? And where do we need to be developing research, perhaps tools, technologies, to be addressing this and understanding the impacts in the longer term as well as short term. And that was released in 2011, and then we moved on to our big Oceans and Human Health paper. Our board, they are free to suggest topics that they feel would be important for future research. So every time we have a meeting, there is an open call, and one of these suggestions was to highlight this, that there was work in the US about linking oceans and human health. And so it was felt it was an important topic to really make people aware in Europe as well. And so we set up a working group of, I think, 12 members from across Europe, and we conducted a 2-year activity to produce this position paper that really wanted to outline what are the strategic priorities, where do we go next, and what do we need to do. So just to give you an idea of what that was about, here's an outline of the content. So first of all, we outlined what the links between oceans and health were, as I've said now. What are the hazards, the risks, the benefits, and the opportunities, all need to be considered. Then how do we address the public health challenges? So really, because we are representing the marine community, bringing the public health aspect into that, introducing these two sides of this problem almost. And I should say the working group was composed not only of marine scientists, but we also had public health and medical experts included in that group, so that it was very much a collaborative effort, viewing both sides equally. And then finally we produced a research strategy. Where do we go next? What do we need to understand more of? And I'll just give you an overview of those here. So improving the understanding of transmission processes of various different toxic chemicals and organisms through the environment into humans, understanding the causal relationships, direct and indirect, between diseases, adverse and also beneficial effects, improving monitoring and surveillance techniques so that we have a much greater understanding of what we're dealing with, in essence, looking at environmental modelling so we know how some of these toxins and so on are moving through the systems, very much wanting to highlight the interdisciplinary collaboration needs, to link the experience and the knowledge from the two very disparate sides together as a whole. Looking at indicators, what do we need to understand more of, what, not just the environmental indicators, but also social, economic, and so on. It really does need to be a global overview of the project. And then finally, valuation methods. How can we demonstrate that by addressing X, Y, and Z, we're making important, significant improvements to the lives of people, but also how it would be beneficial to ensure that the ocean is sustainable. This is why, because you will benefit here and here. As a result of this, there were several journal papers published, and there was also a workshop held in Cornwall. And this was, again, a coming together of both sides of the community, and they released a unanimous call for coordinated, transnational and interdisciplinary oceans and human health research programs in Europe. And this was widely disseminated to policymakers, to the Commission, to the European Parliament, and to national bodies as well, to really put the message out there. This is what needs to be done, and this is exactly what we're calling for. It was very specifically laid out. And to further this, in 2014, we hosted the EuroSin conference alongside the Italian presidency of the European Parliament, and this, as is often done with our EuroSin events, we released a declaration which comes not just from European Marine Board, but is very much supported by the whole marine science community in Europe. And one of these points, again under the first point of valuing the ocean, we called for coordinated, cross-disciplinary and integrated programs on oceans and human health, targeted at understanding and managing the risks and benefits to human physical and mental well-being from interaction with the sea. So again, this was very widely distributed. It was the event was attended by high-up ministers from the Italian government and a wide range of very important stakeholders, and the message got through, I think, because as a result of our actions, JPI Oceans included in their strategic agenda, one of the 10 points is now linking oceans, human health and well-being, so specifically looking at this very important topic. And also a European framework project call specifically included text from our documents, almost word for word, and I'll come back to that later, but that was under the Blue Growth call, which came out last year. So in the interim, I talked earlier about this ocean literacy need. We need to make citizens more aware of what the ocean is doing for us, how we influence the ocean and how it influences us. And so European Marine Board, along with VLIZ and many other partners, are involved in a project called Sea Change, which runs until next year. And this is very much focused on ocean literacy. So how can we help European citizens to understand how their health depends on the health of the seas and of the ocean? And there's some documents at the back of the room, both of the European Marine Board publications and also from the Sea Change project. So if you're interested, you can have a look there. So from this project, we developed a set of fact sheets and an animation very much aimed at children, explaining how the ocean and human health connections work. And we specifically focused on 5 areas. So climate regulation, that is from the ocean, importance of seafood, marine pollution problems, the medical benefits such as these bioresources for pharmaceuticals and medicines, etc., and also the physical and mental well-being effects. And again, these have been very widely distributed. The project is also developing ideas for schools to take on board some of this knowledge and this teaching, just to bring the oceans to people.